gosh, I just remember I was so discouraged because I had a neurology appointment the next day, and I knew that they were going to tell me, like, you're just stuck with it.
Yeah.
Because this is July. September's not that far away. It's just, like, I had plateaued.
Yeah.
And I was still doing all my exercises and everything. I was using my, like, therapy putties that were, like, super, super thick, and you'd have to squeeze it, and it was so difficult, but I was doing it all the time, and it wasn't making a difference. And I went in that night, and I don't even remember what the sermon was about. I remember I walked out during worship because I wanted to go into the bathroom and just cry for a second. And I sat through the sermon, and at the end there was an altar call, and I don't even know if it was for healing. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
It could have been for something totally unrelated, but I was like, I need to go to Caleb for this.
Yeah.
And I went to him, and we prayed, and I cried, and I went back to my seat, and I felt a pulse in the center of this finger, like the worst one out of all of them. And it was like you could feel a little bit on the surface, but as it got to the center, it was just like nothing.
Yeah.
So, but it was at like the core of this finger, and I felt it pulse, and I was like, I'm not making this happen. Like, do my other fingers feel like this? Does this hand feel like? No. And so I went to Caleb. Well, I tried to. He had like gone back up on the stage. Yeah. So I grabbed Livy and I told her, and she was like, looked at Caleb and like pulled him down for a second. And I told him, and he kind of like explained the situation to the congregation, and he had all of the women come up and surround me and pray for me. And that same night, like everyone prayed, and I had a friend that was like, I want you to go home and touch a hot stove because you're going to be able to feel it this time.
Yeah.
And it was like the most amazing moment. And then one of my other friends was having a hard time with something, and so we were praying for her and everything. And one of my other friends, my friend Dylan, had pulled me over afterwards and was like, hey, I got this word and I don't know who it was for, but I'm just hearing dreams. And I like pulled him over so quickly, and I was like, I have to tell you this story, because a couple weeks before, I had this dream, and I don't remember my dreams. I don't remember them at all. I don't lucid dream. I like wake up and I don't know if I've dreamt or not.
Yeah.
Unless they're like really bad. But that night I was in the middle of one dream, and it flashed to black, and it was like consciously I woke up. I was fully aware of everything, but I was asleep. Like, I was not able to wake myself up. If I would have tried, I would have stayed in it.
Yeah.
And it flashed to this vision of myself sitting in a garden. It looked like the gardens from like Miracles from Heaven, where it was like all flowery, and it was so vibrant and so peaceful. And I remember hearing like birds chirping, and I was just sitting crisscross applesauce like on the ground.
Yeah.
And like looking around at everything. And I heard God's voice over it, and he said, you're going to be okay. And then it like flashed to black again. It kept playing the other dream. It was just so strange.
Went back to your worldly dream.
Yes.
So weird.
And I woke up that day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what that was. And I kept it to myself.
That's crazy.
Until Dylan said something. And I went home, and I remember I told my mom what had happened and everything, and I told her the dream and all of the stuff. And from then on, my fingers improved like drastically. I stopped doing the exercises. I didn't even try to do them anymore. I think that was literally the last time that I did it. And they've gotten so much better. We're like, every once in a while, like if I'm super exhausted, they'll feel a little stiff, but for the most part, they feel very similar to this one.
That's amazing.
I know. And I remember I went to the neurologist the next day and I was like, I got a pulse in his finger yesterday. And she was like, good. So that was amazing. I felt like I was doing so much better. And I was just so happy to be past it. And I got to my like 1 year out mark. And I had told my neurologist that day that my brain was struggling. And I knew that it was. I didn't feel like I could do my schoolwork very well. Like it was so hard. I like sun up to sundown I did schoolwork because it took me so long. As I couldn't do anything, I wasn't remembering. We'd be doing like book reports and I'd be like, okay, I need to read this book like 10 times because I read it and I couldn't tell you what it was about. And she was like, okay, well, for college, you're gonna need this thing. It's called a neuropsych test, where if you get it done by this certain doctor, they can give you a paper and no one can dispute that because it's like, it's a very hard test. It's very accurate, all the things. And so it was literally on my like 1 year anniversary of this happening. I went in, it was like a 4-hour test. I think it was actually 6. And you go in and you do it for like 4 hours. They give you a lunch break and then you come back and you finish it up. And I thought that it was fine. I was just happy to have it done. I was like ready to celebrate that I had made it a year out and it was so good and everything. And then I was doing so much better because the migraines had also stopped with the stroke.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of. They slowly started coming back like 6 months later, but it wasn't like I was getting them every day like before. It was like I would get one like every 3 months or something. It was bad when they would come back because it was traumatic at that point because I was like, oh my gosh, this thing that I dealt with for so long that I thought was gone, and it was like my biggest, like, I am so happy that this is gone, is coming back. And I thought that it was going to come back at the same intensity that it was before.
Yeah.
And I went in for the results like a week later. And I had gotten one that day, and I remember sitting in the waiting room, and I couldn't see, and I just bawled the whole way there. And I sat in there, and they brought us in, and I've gotten a lot of bad news in my life. I don't think I'd ever gotten, like, that was probably the worst that I'd ever gotten in one sitting. They said basically I scored in the negatives on almost everything. So that means that 100% or more than 100% of the population can do these things better than I can. The only thing I scored well on was like these like brain puzzles, and that was it. Because I'd done so much of them in occupational therapy by that point. But everything else, like processing speed, they figured out that everyone processed things like 5 to 10 times faster than I did. I had a memory disorder. They diagnosed me with anxiety and depression in that same appointment, and then like a generalized processing disorder. So I got like 4 different diagnoses in the same second. They're like, this is about as bad as this could be. This is probably the worst time in your life. Are you doing speech therapy or anything like that? You need to be doing that.
Yeah.
And I was like, I actually started it a couple weeks ago. Yes, I'm doing that, but I thought that I was doing so good, and to go into that appointment and then tell me literally this is probably the worst time in your life, which they were wrong. But well, maybe not, because after that I went into a suicidal spiral.
Yeah.
And I knew that it wasn't my thoughts. That was like the weirdest thing, because I knew that I wanted to live. And I knew that I wanted to live for a really long time. But it was like I didn't want to drive. Because I would acknowledge, like, every pole that I would drive past. Like, if I just hit it, it would be done. But it wasn't me. I kept telling myself, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
What is happening right now? And Caleb and Livy found out, and I had talked to them about it, but I was still like, this isn't me. Like, I don't know how to describe it any other way than these are not my thoughts. Like, completely unsolicited. Like, they just pop into your head. I remember my mom would leave the house, and I would look at the clock and be like, okay, you have 30 minutes. And I didn't want to. I had no plans of doing anything, but it came into my head like every 5 seconds. My mom had to start driving me places. And I was in college at the time too, so I was having to drive out to school and drive back, and I was so sick. I was so sick. And I didn't know. But it came to bringing it to the light. I would have, like, if I would tell people, this is what's happening, they got better. And so as I kept telling, like, my close friends that this was happening, or I'd call someone when I would get one, that for some reason, I don't know if it's just you're bringing it to the light and the enemy just has to back off.
Not, for real. The enemy does not want that stuff to be brought to light. Yeah.
He wanted me to keep it to myself, but I was telling people, and it did get better over time. It took a while, but I slowly came out of it. And then it was that, I think it was that same school year? It must have been, because that was 2021. That winter, I had been wanting to get braces for so long. I hated my teeth. It was like my biggest insecurity ever. And my dentist had been telling my parents for years, like, you've got to take her to an orthodontist. And it happened at 18. And we went in this one day, and they were like, hey, she needs double jaw surgery. That's what needs to happen, and her wisdom teeth need to come out. And my dad was like, I'm going to get a second opinion. I don't know about this. So we booked an appointment with this other doctor that was really highly respected. And we went to him and said the same thing. Like, we've got these, like, couple of options, but she needs to have surgery because my back teeth were wearing down. Because my jaws were just positioned in a weird way where my teeth were doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing. There were jobs of other teeth and all of that kind of stuff. And we were like, okay, well, what do we do here? And he was like, well, like, I think from my standpoint, I can do this really well. I do these kinds of things in my sleep, honestly. He was a Christian. He goes to Severe Heights, so we had that kind of connection where I knew that I was in good hands. He was really peaceful and really calming. Like, he came in like sweatpants, a sweatshirt, and like tennis shoes. Yeah. I was like, you're great. You're amazing. But in that appointment, he was like, I'm good, but I don't know if you're going to clot again. That's my biggest concern at this point. So he left the room, and I just cried because I was like, I can't do that again. I don't know what I would do if that happened again. And they were like, it's okay. Like, we're going to get it figured out. He referred me to a hematologist that's a blood doctor. And we finally got the appointment, and we told him, like, hey, man, this is like 5 days before surgery. Is that going to be okay? And he was like, oh, yeah, that's plenty of time. He didn't know. It was the Friday of the first Oasis conference. I went into that hematology appointment. And he had told me, like, there's 2 blood clotting disorders that children didn't test for. I would really like to have those before you do this. Yeah. And I was like, I can't. I can't push the surgery back. If I push it back, it's going to be a couple months. And I'm going to be getting into school at that time. You guys are saying this recovery is really awful.
Yeah.
I can't. Or I'm not going to go back to school. And they were like, okay, like, you can do it. Like, I'm sure it's probably fine. This is what we're going to do. He put me on this, like, slow... If I stopped taking this blood thinner, it would come out of my system pretty quickly. It wasn't like some of those, like, they build up in your system and it takes some time to come off of it, because they told me that the biggest complications with this surgery was that people bleed too much or they don't bleed enough and they clot. I was like, cool, I'm on blood thinners and I've had a stroke. Awesome. So I just kind of went with it, and my dad had asked me how I felt, and I was like, well, I can either, like, have this ruin my weekend and not stop thinking about it and go into a panic all weekend long, or I can just trust that the Lord has this and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. I wasn't really stressed about it all weekend. I went with it. And I told my mom, and I remember my mom was like, we need to do this the right way. And I was like, I think it's fine. And this surgery was on a Wednesday. My birthday was Tuesday. I turned 19. And the next day was my brother's birthday. He's 5 years younger than me, but his birthday is the 22nd. Mine's the 21st of June. So we were gone all day, and he was alone, and I still feel bad.
Aww. No.
I know.
That's so sad.
I still feel bad to this day.
Surely you've made up for it by now.
I hope so. But I had this surgery. I knew that it was huge, and I had it like the next day. And so my whole birthday I was like...
At least you got to enjoy one last day.
I did. I ate so much, and I remember after it was done, I was like, I should have eaten more. It would have been fine. But they did the surgery. I went in that next morning. My surgeon prayed with me before we went in.
Aww.
He was so great. I was under for like 5 hours.
That's crazy.
It's a really long surgery. So I had so much anesthesia. By that point, I was already losing my hair like crazy.
Yeah.
And then with that much anesthesia, it just makes it fall out.
Yeah.
So bad, like in clumps. They kept me overnight. It was horrible. That was so traumatic, waking up in the recovery room, because it was like a giant room of beds, like in a circle, and just unconscious people. It was just so
that sounds
weird.
like a lot of fun.
It was. I was so stressed out. I couldn't talk.
That's kind of like creepy.
It really was. I was like, why would we have it set up like this? Because all the other recovery rooms I'd been in, you know, there's like, you have curtains.
You have your own space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was just like, you wake up and everyone around you is passed out. And I was in so much pain.
Oh my gosh.
Not from my jaw, but the anesthesiologist just ripped my breathing tube out that went down your throat. So I had like cuts down my throat. And I was in so much pain, and I couldn't tell anyone that I was in pain. I would just like grab my throat, and they were like, your jaw hurts? And I was like, no.
Oh my goodness.
I couldn't talk for a month. I ate through a syringe. It was just like smoothies. I got home, and I went back that same day, because I was so swollen and my nose was just so full of blood that I couldn't breathe. Mm-hmm. And you can't breathe through your mouth at all. You're wired shut, like nothing moves. I tried.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was going to pass out, because you can't, there's no way for that to get through. And I wanted oxygen. Yeah. So I went back into the emergency room, and they gave me oxygen, and they were looking at everything. They're like, you have to get it cleaned out. They gave me Afrin. That didn't really do a whole lot. So I went back to my surgeon the next morning, and they put me to sleep, cleaned everything out, all the things. And then I got a couple days away from that, And I had just taken a shower, and for those couple days, like, my hair was coming out so bad. And I was doing my hair, and I felt this time my right arm start to go. Not to the intensity that this one did. It was probably like half that.
Mm-hmm.
So I could still feel it a little bit, but not a lot. And it's the weirdest thing because you feel it happen. Because it all gets warm and then it's just like gone. And so, of course, I panicked. I ran out of the bathroom and I stood at the top of the stairs and I just tried to like scream, cry, anything I could do to get my family to come up the stairs, and they were at the bottom and I was just like hitting my arm. And they ran up the stairs and they're like, "What's happening? Is it happening again?" And I nodded and I couldn't really feel it, and it lasted like 7 minutes and then it resolved. And it went away. And I lost my mind. I had my iPad and I had like the notes on my iPad, so I would like write out everything I wanted to say. And I said that had to be a mini stroke.
Yeah.
Because I know what that feels like. I'm never going to forget that in my life. That's what just happened. And we like got everything together. I went in my pajamas that I was wearing and we went to the hospital. And they did an MRI, and the thing about mini strokes that's so frustrating is they don't show up on imaging because they're so quick and they're small. Like, the clot themselves is little.
Yeah.
And even after, like, when I got TPA with the first stroke, even though those clots were large enough to see on the imaging, because it was a full stroke and it was pretty strong, and even that, like, after you get TPA, those won't show up on imaging for a couple days because the clot is there and it takes a minute to scar. So when you go in after it's already happened and they do an MRI or something of that sort, they say, "Well, you didn't have a stroke. There's nothing on here." We're like, "This is not really the same.
Yeah.
This is a little different, but I swear that's what happened." And they were like, "This is a kind of migraine." And I was like, "Not the migraines again. I'm going to lose it." Like, if you tell me it's a migraine.
And there wasn't a way for them to monitor you, like, at home or anything?
Mm-mm.
That's crazy.
I was so frustrated because I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell them. By that point, I had had so many IVs in my arm that week that when they went to put it in, I had gone to Children's and they ended up transferring me elsewhere. When they put my IV in, I had like 10 that week in that arm from going to the hospital and then going to my doctor, and they would put you to sleep. And then, like, I just had so many because I was in and out so much. But when they put it in, there was no blood that came out of it. And they said that it was spongy, and they like pushed it up and moved it around, and I almost threw up and fainted at the same time.
That sounds terrible.
It was one of the worst things. But it was so bad by that point that there was nothing that they could do. They kept me in the hospital for a couple days. I begged to go home because at that point I had just been in there so much. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't tell them, like, this is what happened and all of these things. My family members were misreading what I was saying a lot. Because, like, I would try to say, like, I'd try and say thank you, and I had some friends that knew what it meant when I'd, like, but, like, they'd say something and I'd try and respond, but I wouldn't have anything on me, and they didn't understand, and they'd get mad because they thought that I meant something else when I didn't, and I couldn't express that that's not what I was saying. So I couldn't tell these doctors what was going on, and they didn't really advocate for me. They didn't change my blood thinners, and I went home. And so I kept getting more for like 2 weeks until my blood thinners stabilized. I'd get them like every other day, like clockwork. I'd start to feel my arm go, which is so strange. And that happened the same way before the big stroke.
Yeah.
When I would get them for a month, it was like in the afternoon every day. which is just so strange. But I recovered. I was extremely malnourished because I was drinking smoothies through a syringe, and it was so frustrating. I didn't want a lot of it. I lost, like, it was over 10 pounds within a couple days. I was teensy tiny. None of my clothes fit anymore. But I recovered after like 3 months. I was finally able to eat solid food again. I went back to school, and I got a couple months out, and then I was in one of my art classes at that point in time, and we were getting close to Thanksgiving. And that semester was really hard, as is, because I was recovering from surgery and I couldn't eat a lot and I didn't really have an appetite. And I was losing my hair, and I felt like my symptoms were getting worse. I would go to school, and then I'd have like a break in between, and then I'd have to go back at some point, and I'd come home and I'd eat lunch. And I would sit on the couch, and the level of exhaustion I can't even begin to describe. I felt like I'm never going to get off this couch. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to lay here.
Yeah.
I could sleep. It didn't matter how much. Like, even after a full night's sleep, if I didn't wake up, I slept for like 13 hours, I would feel the exact same. I'd wake up, my eyes would feel heavy. They'd burn. Like, I was so beyond exhausted, but I thought that it was fine. And it was a couple days before Thanksgiving, and I had a friend that she was stuck at work, and she didn't have a car, and she was trying to get someone to take her home, and I was like, I'll take you home. And I went. This is like it's like 8 o'clock at night. It was dark, and I went to go and get her, and I dropped her off at her house, and I was on my way home, and I started to feel my arm go again. And I was driving, and so I pulled into a gas station, and just, again, like, hyperventilating, crying, why is this still happening? Why can't I get these to stop? And I called my parents, and they came to me and picked me up, and I just kept saying, for some reason, like, I want to go home first before we go. For no reason.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When you're having one of those. And so we went home, and I was like, I don't know what I want. And then we just left and went to the emergency room. And when you're having a stroke, things happen like very, very quickly. So they're like immediately rushing you into MRIs, like getting everything done as fast as humanly possible. And of course, again, because it was a mini stroke, they didn't find anything, and they sent me home that same night without adjusting my blood thinners. And my hematologist was really backed up, so I didn't get in for a couple weeks, and I just kept having them. And it was the most terrifying thing to have those come back. And then I went a couple months. I still felt so sick. But I got to March of 2023, and they happened again. So it was like every couple months I'd start having them, and I was like, what in the world is going on? Am I like gaining a tolerance to blood thinners? That doesn't happen. That doesn't make any sense. And we had switched over doctors. I had I have a friend. Her name is Amber. And she had been working at this office. It was a chiropractic / functional, wow, I can't talk, functional medicine office. And my mom had been like, I want to switch over chiropractors. I don't know where I want to go. And I was like, oh, like, I know someone that works at one. Let me ask her, like, what goes on there. And we're, like, looking at all of the services that they offer. And they had this thing called neurofeedback on there that was like, rewiring your brain to work like how it did before if you've had, like, concussions, like, different traumatic brain injuries and stuff. And we were like, oh, like, this.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, like, I think this is what we're supposed to do. It was the hardest decision because I had to leave speech therapy for us to be able to afford it. And I knew that was, like, working to a degree. And I loved my speech therapist so much. I did not want to leave her. But we decided to switch over, and we walk into this office on the first day and we see Dr. B that adjusted me and my family when I was like 7 years old at a different office, and he remembered my mom and remembered us, and it felt just so homey in there.
That's awesome.
And so sweet. And we were like, wait, I know you. And it had been like 13 years at that point.
That's crazy that he remembered you guys.
I know. It was wild. It had been so long, but he still knew who we were. And we started seeing him, and we were doing some functional medicine things, but not a lot. And then I started having those mini strokes again in March. And one day when I was getting adjusted, I was like, can we talk about this? Like, can we do something? This is the worst thing in the world. It's like I'm gaining a tolerance to blood thinners. That's weird.
Yeah.
And he's like, that's impossible. There has to be something here. And so we got an appointment, and he was literally on the way to the beach while we did this appointment. Like, he was in the car with his family. And we're like, do you want to pick a different time? He's like, no, this is fine. And we got autoimmune testing done because he's like, there's got to be something here.
Yeah.
And it took a month for the results to come back, and I had very, very, very severe vasculitis. It's an autoimmune condition where your body is attacking your blood vessels. So it's probably also why my veins, like every time I was getting IVs, for one, it hurt so bad because they were ripped up already, and then they were not getting a whole lot out of it. Like, they would blow so quickly.
That sounds so painful.
It was. And we were talking through this, and he said that if we wouldn't have found it at the time that we did, and we would have never tested for that, I wouldn't have lasted another, 10 years, because the strokes would have just kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and blood thinners wouldn't be able to hold it anymore. So we were like, okay, well,
what are you going to do
let's
about
get
it?
this done.
Yeah.
So I went through a pre-treatment phase that was deep anti-inflammatory and really hard keto, to just kind of calm everything down to the best that we could. And then I started this treatment called Cellcore. It's a really intense detox where it tries to find anything in your body that's not supposed to be there and kill it and get it out. It was a 5-month process. After that, I went on some immune suppressants and stuff like that, and it was so hard. It was so bad. I was getting treatment sick every single day, where it felt like I was having a hot flash, but I was cold at the same time, and then I was gonna pass out, and my heart rate would spike. I'd check my ketones and I'd be at 4, which is insane because it's hard to get to 1, and I would test them and prick my finger every day to try and see where they were at. It was just kind of a nightmare, honestly. It went through the whole summer, and I laid on the couch all summer long. And then that fall, I was so excited because I was I'm gonna go back to school.
Yeah.
And I started going, and I couldn't keep up because I would start to feel sick and I'd have to lay down, and I wasn't getting any of my stuff done. Because art is kind of one of those things where you really have to be locked in.
Yeah. You
can't just half do this while you're not feeling good, especially with the sheer amount of stuff that you do for art majors, which just sounds so weird. Because you're art majors really do have a lot of work, and you're come on. I'm
not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Wild. I have 3 drawings that had to be huge and very detailed and have a crazy concept behind them, and they'd be due within a week, and
That's
each
crazy.
one would take 40 hours.
Oh my gosh.
It was wild. And then you'd have to do critiques and all the things. You'd have to stand there while everyone talks about everyone else's, and you have to fix everything and then write the artist statements and all the stuff, and it's just a lot. It was crazy. I love them, but it's wild.
Yeah.
And the semester before, because my the autoimmune disease was so bad, I was getting sick every 5 seconds. I got the same virus 3 different times, and when you're in studio classes, you have to be in there. Like, if
Yeah.
you're home, like, I can't do ceramics at home.
Yeah.
So I was just falling behind. I was dropping classes at that point. I had to go through disability services because I was well under full-time at that point, and I still was, like, struggling to keep up because I was so sick.
Yeah.
Beyond sick. So I tried to go back to school. I went for a couple weeks and then stopped and immediately fell back into my, like, summer routine of, like, getting up, getting food, and then laying on the couch for the whole day. My first nap would come at, like, 9, 10 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was just, like, I was just trying to stay awake throughout the day. I'd, like, go and sit on the front porch every once in a while and sit in the sun and read or something, but it was a lot of just laying on the couch. But I finished it, and we got to March of the next year, and we retested because we thought, like, okay, like, now is a good time. Like, I think we've done a lot with this, and we retested, and that was the longest 30 days of my entire life, wondering how they were gonna come back.
I bet.
Because we were getting a whole autoimmune panel. I also had a, like, liver thing with the first one. It looked like it was just kind of starting. So I had some kind of liver autoimmune as well with the first one, but it wasn't anywhere near like the other one. We had guessed with how bad the other one that I had probably had it since I was very young. And that was causing the migraines for sure because the blood vessels would narrow and the blood couldn't get through. So when I got on blood thinners in the hospital with the first stroke, it just helped it flow. And that's why I stopped having them. But then as the disease progressed, I'd get more. And as I'd get, like, super inflamed and I'd go through a flare-up, that's when they'd start coming. But I went in one afternoon, and I would ask, like, every single week that I went in. Even though I knew, like, it was going to take a while for them to come back, like, a week later after getting them, I was like, do you guys have the test results yet? I went in, and I was asking them, like, do you guys have them yet? I knew that, like, spring break was the next week, so if they didn't come in that day, then I wasn't going to get them for another 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They'd definitely be in by that time, but I did not want to wait that long. It was already so hard. And I had asked them, this was a Thursday, they're closed on Fridays, and I was like, are they in? And they checked before I left, and they're like, no, they're not. I was in at like 4 o'clock, and I went home, and I was getting ready for Oasis that night, and by 5, I got a phone call from Dr. B, and he said that they were completely clean. And with autoimmune diseases, that does not happen.
Yeah.
Because
that was after FireCon, right?
Yes.
Fire conference.
Oh, yes. I missed some things. So
that was like the most insane part.
That was so weird. So, when I had finished Cellcore as well, so I finished Cellcore and I went to, we had like an Oasis family vacation that weekend. And, since I finished Cellcore to when I got the test results, that entire time, I was like, just not losing my mind, but I was like, I need to know where this is, like, right now.
Yeah.
I need to get this retested. I asked them a couple times to retest before we ended up doing it, because it was like eating away at me. And we went to this Oasis family vacation. This was the first time that I hadn't been on Cellcore because I had finished it like a week before. And we were doing seeing and hearing, which was this thing that Caleb loves to do. Yeah. And it's so good. But it's where he gives us a lot of intentional time to actually sit and ask God questions and give it the time to listen.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we'd be doing this, there was one time we did it where he was like, you guys have been sitting in here for an hour and a half. And it did not feel like an hour and a half. It felt like 30 minutes.
Time flies whenever you spend time with friends.
It was so strange. That is like the fastest time has ever gone by for an hour and a half. And I had done this like 5 times at this point, and we get the same paper every time. It's like, what's special about me? What's your favorite thing? Like those kinds of things, which are really good questions, of course, and they're very sweet to hear those things. But I was like, I want to do something different this time, because I've asked those questions so many times. And I wasn't even really expecting to hear anything. I don't really know why, but I wasn't for some reason. And I sat there and I had asked him, like, what is something that you want me to know right now? Because I was waiting for those test results. I was like, I don't know what this is, but sure, I'll ask that. And I was sitting there, and it was really quiet for a long time. And then I heard, like, so far out of left field, be like a lion. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I was like, is that my flesh? Because, like, I couldn't even start to tell you what I think that means.
Yeah.
And I was still kind of like, I don't know if that was him or if that was me. But I also knew, like, I was not thinking anywhere near that.
That's how you know it's from God, though.
Yeah, but I was like, I don't know. And I did what everyone else in my generation does, and I pulled out my phone and I Googled, like, what's the weakness of a lion?
It's funny because you knew that you were going to go on Google.
I know. I don't even think I Googled what's the weakness of a lion. I was like, I Googled, like, what does a lion do in fear? Mm. And it was not giving me any straight answers. And, you know, like, people also ask.
Yeah,
thoughts.
like the questions under
Yeah. And one was like, what's the weaknesses of a lion? And I was like, sure. And I clicked on it, like, so flippantly, like, I'm not expecting to see anything from this for some reason, which is probably the enemy hindsight, because I was really like, I don't know what's going on. And I clicked on it, and it got so real so fast, because I kid you not, like, bolded, underlined, all caps, highlighted. It was in yellow. I think I still have a screenshot somewhere. It said vulnerability to disease. And I was like, is this the enemy? Because I don't know where this is going. My heart dropped into my stomach. I felt like I was about to throw up. And I was like, I need to get off of this. So I started looking at the strengths of a lion. And it was like bravery. They don't back down from a fight. They fight until they have nothing left. Like, all of these things, the, like, ferocity, like, those kinds of things. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to know. And then at that point, I was also like, what's coming where that's what I need to know? As by that point, stuff like that was popping up, like, everywhere. It was always altar calls for physical healing and stuff like that. And that is like, that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
But it was like every single week something of that sort was coming up. And I knew that in the past when that would happen, something bad was coming that I needed to be prepared for. And I needed to be built up to get through it. So I was really nervous.
Yeah.
But of course, my tests ended up being completely clear. So it wasn't that way that time. I was just really stressed out that it was going to be. But I cried when I saw that. And then FireCon, a couple months later, I had been... Was I shooting? No, I was greeting that weekend for the first FireCon. And that was so much for me. Because at that point, I wasn't feeling good, though. Like, even though the vasculitis was gone, I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
I was still beyond exhausted. Like, I felt like a zombie just walking. But I hadn't gotten many strokes in a year. Those ones at March were the last ones that I have had. So, we got to, it was night 2. And so I knew that we were, like, after that it was done, I could go home. And I had been, like, standing around all weekend, which is so fun. I love greeting.
Conferences are so exhausting. So I can't imagine how exhausted you were.
They were. I felt like I wasn't even in my body anymore. I was like, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go to bed
at this point.
Yeah, and I knew that I also had to be there to greet that morning too.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm gonna get through it and it's gonna be fine, but I want to go to bed.
Yeah.
And I was sitting all the way in the back, and I think it was Amanda Crab. I don't remember.
You told me it was Amanda Crab, yeah.
Okay. I think it was. And she gets up, and before she preached anything, she was like, I want to call out neurological disorders. Stand up if you've got that. And I'm in the back like, okay. And I stood up, and I was like, my legs are going to collapse, but okay, I will stand here. Like, I don't know where this is going. I'm kind of like a zombie. I'm like
I'm delusional,
I'm delusional, like laughing, delirious at this point. Because I'd been standing all weekend. I've got like 2 of my friends behind me, and I'm like, this is crazy. And I was standing, and then she's like, neurological disorders from strokes, and I'm like, okay. All right.
So crazy.
And then she said like something else that was also like tacked onto that. Oh, it was females. It was women.
Yeah.
And I didn't know. I stood there, and I'm like looking back at them, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And one of the friends did not know that I had a stroke at that point. I hadn't shared that part with them yet. And so they were just looking at me like, do you want to tell this story? Because they just said that you had a stroke. And I was like, yeah. And then within like 5 seconds of that last one of like females that have had strokes and have neurological disorders, there was like a horde of people that came to find me in the back of the room. Like Caleb and Levy came immediately. I had like so many people crowded around me and prayed for me. And then the rest of that night after that, I was just like sitting in the back of the room, like staring at the ceiling. At that point, I didn't know what to think. Like, I knew that was crazy and that was wild, and I just kind of sat there.
You were super caught off guard.
Yes, and I just kind of sat there, and I, like, sat on it. And for the rest of the night, I don't think I caught any of the sermon. I was just, like, staring at the ceiling.
That was sermon enough for you?
Yeah.
You were like, I'm good.
I was like, that was good. I can go home. FireCon was a success.
Yeah, for real?
But that was a couple weeks before. I think I did get those tests done like that week, and then I didn't get them back until March. So I knew that those were coming too, and that I was going to be getting them. And so that just made it like an extra level of crazy that I knew that was coming. And then, of course, like I got the tests and they were fine and it was amazing and all the things, because you don't get rid of autoimmune diseases. Yeah. Those are things like when you're diagnosed with them, they tell you you're going to have this for your entire life. Because it's like, they describe it to you like a dimmer switch. Like you can turn it down, but you never turn it off. Yeah. And it flares up and then you can dim it back down, but you never get numbers that are in the green. And he sent me, I think he texted me these from his personal phone number. I don't know. But he texted me the test before and the test after, and everything is in the green. There's nothing even in the yellow anymore. Everything is good. And he said, this is literally a miracle. Yeah. Like, I need you to know that.
100%. It was.
Yeah. Like amazing. 100% healed.
Yeah.
There's nothing there anymore. And I bawled my eyes out. I was like calling people immediately. That was just crazy. But I went on and I still felt sick. Even though that was gone. I was so happy that was gone. I thought that I was going to be going back to school that fall. Like, I was already like emailing my professors, like, I'm coming back, get me an advising appointment, like all of those kinds of things, because I had kept them up to date. They were really great. All of my art professors have been. And they were so excited. I had like a meeting with my advisor that was one of my past professors, and she was telling them like they were setting up for the student show, and I had won it the year before. And she was like, I was telling them all, like, I've got a meeting with Alyssa today, and it was so cute. It was so sweet. And I thought I was gonna be good, and it was gonna be fine. And then, we'd gotten like a couple months out from that, and I was still feeling the same. Like, I felt really sick. And I would tell them, like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel the exact same.
Yeah.
And they were like, I don't think your body's making energy. I think that's what's going on. And I was like, okay. So we did a couple protocols for that. I went on treatments for it, and nothing touched it. Like, it didn't make a dent. And so I would go in, and I had this friend that worked there at the time, because I go in for treatment twice a week even now. And so I'd be in there all the time, and sometimes I'd have to have people drive me. I do that a lot because I'm not aware enough to get all the way out there, especially in the afternoon, because I usually sleep through the afternoon. So then by that point, my body is like, we're supposed to be asleep.
Yeah.
Why are you awake? Why are you driving? And I would go in, and I had a friend that worked there at the time, and she would ask me how I was every time that I came in, and we'd talk about everything. And I would always try to be like I'm good, like, it's okay, it's fine. And she told me one time, and it stuck with me so much, she said, you can know that he's stubborn and it still be hard.
Yeah.
You can know that he's got it all under control, but it still be really difficult. Because it is.
Yeah.
I feel like there's such a misconception with people that have had chronic illness. They're like, they're just so happy all the time because they've been through all of this junk. And while, like, yes, I am so happy to be out of the house and, like, to go to church on Sunday and all those things, but it's really hard. Like, I told my mom one time, like, I think besides losing a child, I think that this is one of the hardest things that someone can go through. Because you want it to go away so bad, and you want to live normally. Like, and it's scary. Like, I mean, even now, if there's no one to drive me to treatment, I am like just trying to stay focused on the highway, like getting to where I need to go. It's so scary, and it's so hard. Like, gosh, I remember, one of it was the March mini strokes of 2023. And I remember thinking, I want to go to the movies. I don't want to think about this. I would love to go to the movies and just, like, bring blankets and wear pajamas and sit and watch, even if it was, like, the weirdest movie that did not make any sense. It was, like, so comforting to me for some reason. And I told my family, like, I just want to go to the movies. Can we please go do something? And at that time, one of the Ant-Man movies was out. And I was like, I want to go see Ant-Man. And my mom was like, I don't want to watch Ant-Man. Let's pick something else. And so we landed on Creed 3. Mm-hmm. Have you seen the Creed movies?
I haven't.
The last one that they made, they bring it up, like, in the very beginning of the movie, that the mom of Adonis Creed had a stroke. Mm-hmm. And my heart rate picked up because I was like, I want to watch something that is nothing like my life at all.
Yeah.
And I immediately, like, started hyperventilating in that movie because I had like 5 that week. And how that movie ends is she dies, and she has a stroke and she dies. And it was like, I was seeing my future on the screen because we couldn't get it under control.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. Like, I was, like, hyperventilating. I was stuffing it down. And there's just... PTSD with chronic illness is so weird. Yeah. And so hard. Even now, sometimes when people talk about their time in the hospital, it will, like, my heart rate will quicken and I'll have to step away. But it's really hard.
Yeah. But God's used it to bring you closer to Him and carry His glory.
Yeah.
You're strong for that. He chose you for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't think that everybody could carry it as gracefully as you can, because
Jesus.
the stuff that you've told me, like I said in the beginning, I could have never guessed that you're carrying all of it, and I just think it's amazing. Like, God chose you for a reason, and I think that He's carrying you too with grace, and it's really sweet to watch. And I think you're so brave for sharing your story, and you are like a lion. I think that's really cool that He gave you that metaphor, because I think that is like the only metaphor that He could have used to kind of equip you with what you needed to know in that season. It was really sweet.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Well, I have my last diagnosis.
Oh, yeah.
That we're still working through right now and need some prayers on. Well, actually, I didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so last fall, I had talked with my doctor about how there were a couple things that could have been playing into why I still felt so sick. And we had talked about a couple things, and we got some tests done, and I got a toxicity panel and an organic acids test. And organic acids tells everything that is going on with your cells. So if they're like deficient in something, if you're not eating enough protein, carbs, like whatever it is, if you're like a vitamin is low, or if it's not making energy, or if there is like an overgrowth somewhere in your body, it will tell you all of those kinds of things. It tells you what's going on at a cellular level. And then the toxicity panel was like heavy metals, molds, like all of those kinds of things. And we got that back again like 30 days later. And it turned out that my body was not making energy, like, at all. It's not making ATP, like, period. I have a bacterial overgrowth in my gut, which would explain so much. I feel like I've been bloated for forever. And then I have a lot of black mold in my body. So I've been doing mold treatments and everything. And
that was fairly recent that you got diagnosed with that.
Yeah, that was only a couple months ago. I've done 2 months of mold treatments, and then I'm on my third. That was like an extra detox. So we will see.
And you said that was from, like, you think that was from when you were a baby, right? The
Yeah.
black mold?
Yeah.
Which is insane to me.
Yes.
Like, I never thought that could be, like, stay in your body and grow in your body.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, and I think, we think I might have some in my lungs, because I've had, like, shortness of breath for forever as well. It's just so crazy, but, gosh, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah, the house that I lived in when I was born, we lived in South Bend, Indiana. It was just, like, a little itty-bitty, like, kind of sketchy town, but, like, the top northern, like, left tip of Indiana, and, we were broke, like, most of my life. So we lived in this itty-bitty red house. It was teensy tiny for like 2 years, from when I was born to like 2 years old. And I don't know what the lady was doing when she lived there before. We think she was like a botanist or something. So the whole house was like a grow house, and my room was the worst of it. So when we moved in, my dad cleaned all the walls because they were like caked with mold, and so he like bleached them and painted over it. But mold is so stubborn.
Yeah.
That's why mold treatments are so hard, because you really have to like really get at it to get any chance of it getting out of your body. So we think that's probably where it came from, because I was an infant and I didn't have an immune system. So even like a small amount that was left, it wouldn't have taken a lot. And also there probably was a lot left.
Yeah.
Because it's so hard to get rid of.
Bleach doesn't really kill mold.
No.
Like, black mold is so hard to kill.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it look like it's gone, and it comes back.
Yeah, exactly.
It comes back even worse, honestly.
Yeah.
After you bleach it.
Yeah. So that's probably where it came from, if we had to guess. And
what do mold treatments look like? Like, how does that even work?
It's so strange. I did this medication called Welcall.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually like a bile sequestrant for people that have like high cholesterol and things like that, but they figured out it has a huge affinity for mold. So as it pulls bile out of your body, it pulls mold with it, which is super gross. But
that's crazy.
It's so strange, but
that's awesome though.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
But it rips up your stomach. And mine, like, I still have the overgrowth in there, so it just made it like 10 times worse. So since then, and mold inflames your brain like crazy. That's one of the like biggest side effects of mold, is your brain is inflamed. So from both of those just being so bad, I've dealt with crazy nightmares because my first and second brain are just so unhappy. But playing worship music in my sleep has helped a lot.
Yeah, I bet. Well, God has healed you twice, at least, that you know of.
Yeah.
He will continue to heal you.
Absolutely.
I fully believe that.
Yeah.
Next FireCon.
Yeah.
We'll lay hands on you.
Yeah.
But if you could explain, like, who is Jesus to you? After everything that you've been through, who is Jesus to you? And how would you explain the person of the Holy Spirit to somebody who is struggling to believe that?
Oh. So peaceful.
Yeah.
So peaceful and like the sweetest presence possible. Like at night when I'm like trying to go to sleep and praying that I don't have any nightmares or anything, I just invite him to stay with me. And then with the worship music on too, it's just like I can't describe it other than just like a
I like how you explain that. You invite him.
Yeah.
You really do have to invite him in, and he's such a gentleman. He's like, you invited me? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll come hang out
I'll stay with you. Yeah.
It's so sweet.
Yeah.
God has been so in your life, and I love that. I love that, how present he is in your story, and you're not afraid to share your story. I just love it. But if you could lead us in a prayer, I'd be really grateful. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Okay. Lord, thank you for this day, and thank you for Kenzie and this platform that you've given her to share stories that need to be heard, Lord. Thank you. Lord, I pray that anyone on the other side of this that needs to hear this is met with it, God. Lord, I pray that the right people find it at the right time, and that it touches them and it makes them feel so seen and so heard and gives them so much hope. Lord, I pray that you would continue to just give so much fruit to this podcast, Lord. I pray that it would just grow exponentially for you and only for you. Lord, I just thank you for all of this. In Jesus' name.